keep working on those two and we'll have to get going here. Should have it by now.
I can watch for him if you want, Dave, and let him in.
All right, let me get going. All right, Dawn, if they pop on here, we'll have everyone except for Mike. Right now we have Dawn, myself, Steve, Sandy, and we're just waiting on Tom and Leah, who both asked for the link, so I know they're joining shortly. All right, we will call the meeting to order at 7:06. We have a lot of folks attending tonight, full room. So again, keep yourselves on mute until you're ready to speak or I call upon you. We will try to use the Zoom system for those who, there comes Tom. For those who know how to raise your hand via Zoom, there's a little hand raise action that you can take. Otherwise, I definitely take some long pauses to allow people to speak. So we will start. We did a roll call of our members. We now have Tom, myself, Leah, Steve, Dawn, and Sandy. And Mike has a prior excuse for tonight. And the agenda before us is fairly fairly simple. We have one issue with several parts. If there are no other changes to the agenda, we need a motion to accept the agenda from one of my fellow commission members.
So move.
Moved by Tom, seconded by Sandy, right?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. And we'll have to do our roll calls. That's the fun of Zoom. Tom,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Steve. I know I saw you pop on here, Steve. Where are you? Are you still with us? No, we have dropped off. Leah's not on that. The chair votes yes. And Sandy,
Yes.
and the motion's approved for those four.
He's gone, Dave.
He left. All right.
No, he's on.
Oh, he's on.
Yeah.
Steve, you might be muted. The agenda is accepted. Approval of the minutes for May 27th, 2020. Any questions, comments, concerns? These are the minutes that were emailed to you and were part of your packet. These are the minutes from back in May when we last met. Dawn, anything from you on these? Or are these good to go?
Excuse me, sorry about that. I believe they are good to go, Dave.
Excellent. Thank you, Dawn. Any other questions, comments from other planning commission members? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the minutes. Seconded by
Support.
Tom. All right. We will do our little roll call. Tom,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Steve, if you can hear me.
Yes.
There you are. The chair votes yes. And Sandy. That was a yes. There we go. All right, motion is adopted. Public comment. So this evening, we have one item up that is the conditional zoning change and preliminary site plan special use. But anyone want to comment on something that's not on the agenda? Because we will have a public hearing on those issues and have comment period for those too. So this is for something that not on the agenda this evening, the public may want to comment on. I will give a little pause here and wait. or if I see a hand.
I have something.
Okay, if you could state your name for the secretary and go right ahead.
My name is Paul Knaufel, and I live at 17250 Garvey Road. And I have a pretty big issue going on over here next door. Used to be the Up House place. You're probably familiar with it. Bob Chapman owns it today. It's being developed, and there's a 2-lane road coming in to my property, and now I am the low spot between where that used to drain into the wetlands over there. So now my septic field's basically going underwater. My house is going underwater because they're building onto that giant berm that Mr. Uphouse left us. I spoke to Mr. Chapman today. He tells me that Carol Kanicki told him it was A-OK a year ago, and that he's cleared to put 4 houses per 2 acres back there. And he's dug out my property line. He's dug out my property marker, dug out my fence, and says, don't worry, because I'm going to bring it up to grade, because I'm taking all the tailings off the 94 project, and I'm going to bring it up to grade against your property by putting in a 2-lane road. So I spoke to my neighbor, Ken Christ, who was also unaware of any such thing going on. And it extends well back. Bob seems like a really great guy, but he's going to turn me into New Orleans here. I get the water from the highway. I get the water from the LeBlancs. I get the water from Mr. Christ. And it used to drain through my property down into the wetlands, which are now filled in with meters and meters of road tailings. And I literally went over the fence and said to the guy driving the bulldozer, stop, you're burying me. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, come on my side of the fence and take a look. So I've been calling quite a lot over the last few months, and I need immediate help over here because there's like less than 6 feet of space between where the dig out that Mr. Uphouse made was and their proposed road. And my yard will flood. My house has been flooding. It's never flooded in the last 22 years I've lived here until this. And I need help.
Yeah. No, I hear you loud and clear. And I'm, Carol, can you remind me this project and where it came from?
That is Bob Chapman bought the property from Jim Uphouse. I never told Mr. Chapman he could go ahead and I may have told him he would be allowed a home on 2 acres, but I never told him he could go ahead. He has no zoning permit to do anything, and he would be in violation of our ordinance because he doesn't have a shared driveway permit either. So that I don't know that much about this project. It's been probably 2 years since I talked with Bob Chapman about what he wanted to do with the property, but has never come forward with anything. He was really kind of waiting for a private road ordinance to be adopted. And since we don't have one, we just have a shared driveway, but he doesn't even have a shared driveway permit. We did put a stop work order a couple of years ago on him doing work on that property. But since that time, and I've tried contacting him and his son, and I've gotten no response from him at all.
Okay, so what's the best course of action here? Is it to, I don't know, go out there maybe? I don't know.
Actually, somebody did.
I don't know. That's a conversation I'm going to have with legal counsel on it.
Okay, but we're aware of it now, and we'll, because
Tonight,
yeah,
right.
I was going
Right.
to ask him about the shared driveway permit. It probably doesn't have that, and if he doesn't have the
No.
zoning compliance permit, then yeah, we need to put a stop on
Yep.
this. Well, appreciate you bringing it up, Paul. I that's exactly the type of thing we want to hear. So thank you.
Okay, I actually need some action like super soon because it's
Okay.
going to take one bulldozer 1 hour to fill in that hole, and then I'm New Orleans without any
Right.
water pumps.
Yep.
So he actually told me today that he had permission for 4 houses per 2 acres, and that he's going to make it into an elder residential space. And that was how he got around the zoning, and and he's going full bore, and he's building, literally, I have video and I have pictures if you'd like to see them of the road that he's actually building directly abutting my property, in fact, onto my property. And it's 2 lanes wide. I mean, you can drive 2 semis past each other on it. And it's, it's actually worse than what Jim did with his berm. At least the berm was just a berm, but I could kind of drain around it. If this road goes in, and he says it's going to be in within the next week because he's taking all the tailings off 94, I'm screwed.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, the time is of the essence, no doubt. I'm familiar with the area, and I could see exactly where the flood would come from. Yeah.
And you're all welcome in my yard at any time. My gate is wide open. Everyone is invited.
All right.
But he does not have permission to do anything that he's doing.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get with
Yeah.
legal counsel and we'll go at this right away. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, the township supervisor actually was out today and
Okay,
took
good.
video as well.
Okay, good. All right, I will, Leah's still having trouble getting on here. Hang on, will not let me on. I'll try to fix that too the next time. I've got 2 hands up. The first was last name Porter, at least on your screen.
Yes. Hi, my name's Mandy Porter. I'm at 18100 Garvey Road. I just want to confirm now is the time I would speak about anything to do with the thing on Pierce Road, right?
No, the Pierce Road item will be up. That'll be up under our public hearing in a second.
Okay, so then I'll have a chance to speak at that point.
You got it.
All right, thank you.
In fact, I'll call you first.
All right, thanks.
All right, Sandra, you probably were the same thing, right? Yeah, if you jumped on late, we're going to start with a couple of items here, and then we'll get into the meat of how all 43 participants are here, I'm sure. Okay, any other public comment not related to the agenda items of the evening?
You are wrong.
Let's see. Okay, here we go. All right. Public comment period is closed. Unfinished business, we don't have any, which is unusual. New business, what I like to do is set the stage and give a little thumbnail history lesson so we all know where we're at and how we got here, because these are things that as someone who used to sit on the other side of the table was always confusing to me. So I like to do that first, and then open the public hearing, which will open with taking public comment. There are actually 2 public hearings this evening. The first one comes first, and then if certain actions happen on that, the second one happens. So the first one is on the conditional rezoning request for the property on Pierce Road. This is an item where a previous rezoning request was before us in the spring, as commission members will remember, and many of you that were on that call. The applicant pulled that request and went back for a conditional rezoning request. So let me do my best to explain that. So in the first request, someone comes in and asks for a zoning change. That zoning change has to be considered irregardless of what they plan to do with it. So if they want to change from ag to industrial, then we look at it as industrial zoning, not whatever specific project they're going to do. And there's a litany of items that we have to look at in judging that. This is a second type of rezoning request called a conditional rezoning request. And that conditional request allows us to look at the rezoning item in connection to a very specific project. And it's only for that project or the things delineated in the agreement in the conditional rezoning. So the applicant for the tow yard, Mr. Kearns, has come back with a conditional request where he addressed some of the issues from the spring and also made it conditional upon a few items. We'll get into exactly what those conditions are when we get into Mr. Kearns' part of the presentation. I think I'll start out and just allow the applicant to just give a quick overview, and then we'll open it up for public comment. And I don't know, Mr. Kern, if you want to do that, or if someone working on the proposal wants to do it, but We'll start there.
Evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Alan Green.
Yep.
I'm counsel for the applicant. We thought that I would do it just because I assisted in the conditional rezoning, and I'm a little bit more familiar with this than Bill Kearns in that regard. And I think you correctly summarized it. We came in with an initial straight rezoning request, and with the rezoning request, after rezoning, anybody could come in, whether it was Mr. Kearns or anybody else, and do anything allowed in the industrial zoning district, subject to site plan approval or special land use approval. And there were concerns expressed by that. So we have done three things. We've submitted a conditional rezoning request, but also went farther and submitted a special land use request and preliminary site plan for the tow yard. That's Mr. Kearns' primary business and reason for being here in the first place. I'll say a little bit of background, then I'll explain the conditions, if I may. And also, Mr. Kearns, of course, is here, and our team is here if anybody has any questions about the operation or the design plans or anything like that, if we get to the site plan. So this really is somewhat of a unique but necessary operation, and I wanted to explain that. Mr. Kearns provides automotive and vehicle towing operations for state, county, and local police agencies and fire agencies, as well as dealerships, motor clubs, and even individual stranded motorists. Most vehicles are taken to some other place, whether it's a vehicle repair shop or wherever it's directed to go, or a police compound yard. But about 10% of the vehicles that Mr. Kearns handles would go back to his facility for a temporary time period before they're sent out to their final destination, which could be, again, a repair facility or some other facility. What we've got on the plan, just so you know, is there's a very small building, 3,600 square feet. I mean, the size of a house, maybe a big house compared to some, or small house compared to others, that has an office, a dispatch center, and enough room to store two trucks, two vehicles, and maybe a break room, things like that. Literally, this entire operation takes less than 1% of the entire area that's been allocated for this particular use. This is not a gas station. It doesn't have vehicle repair facilities. That's not part of the business. One thing that's critical is the proximity to the highways and areas that are served by Mr. Kearns is essential for this kind of operation, because it really depends on the speed at which Mr. Kearns' operation would get to an accident scene or a stalled vehicle. And in fact, Mr. Kearns might have said this last time, for the police agencies he serves, they actually have a particular contractual period of time in which he has to get there. And that speed is really critical for public health, safety, and welfare, as you probably can well imagine. Accident management, getting cars out of the way in a safe and sound manner, in a quick manner, to allow traffic to go through and to allow people to be done in a safe manner is critical. Mr. Kearns told me, and I think he reported this at the last meeting, there's a report that was issued recently. They talk about secondary incidents. That's when people get hurt after the initial incident. And 50% of all secondary incidents, particularly fatalities, occur after the initial incident. So, Mr. Kearns himself is a very interesting guy. And I do want to say this. He is a sort of serial first responder. He's been a fireman for 25 years. He trains. He's an instructor at MDOT on how to handle and manage accident scenes and removal of vehicles. So it's a pretty important thing he does here. And I also want to emphasize, this is really a very low intensity use. It involves minimal traffic. You have a tiny building, no real industrial or warehousing operations that you would typically see in a business use. And the site is actually a perfect site. And I want to say this, it's master plan for mixed business uses, as you folks know, which includes industrial. And And with respect to this particular property, the towing business is going to be in the rear of the property, well off Pierce Road on a 13.07 acre portion of the property, which I'll explain in a moment. And the towing site is actually completely screened and surrounded by natural features and large setbacks. To the east side, you have the same rest of this property, which is significant, and then you have Pierce Road. To the north, you have the railroad, active railroad tracks over there, and some substantial screening. To the south, we have wetlands, natural features, high tension electrical wires, and then the property to the south is also master planned for mixed business uses in the future anyways. And then the property to the east, which is in the rear, far side of the property, it borders agricultural land, and we have tried to establish significant setbacks in that area from that land. So, and I want to emphasize this too with respect to the master plan, and you have a planning report from your planner, and I think she really set forth all the different provisions of the master plan. But this is a fairly new master plan, and the types of uses that this property is planned for include commercial, highway commercial, business park, multiple family, and industrial. And consistency with the master plan, as you folks know, is one of the key criteria for a rezoning. Just to give you an example and compare this use to other uses, general commercial allows department stores, retail businesses, auto dealerships, building supply centers, contractor yards. Highway commercial allows gas stations with repair facilities, motels, hotels, restaurants, and drive-throughs. And of course, there are the industrial uses, which are fairly extensive in your ordinance. When compared to those kind of uses that this property can be put, this has got to be one of the lowest, least intense uses I've ever seen. You've got 2 or 3 tow trucks, a small building for operations, and a fairly small parking lot for temporary parking of vehicles that are brought back there before they're moved on to another location. And it's tucked away in the middle of this large property, away from everybody. But let me get to the conditions in that regard. So the zoning ordinance, one of the most recent changes to the zoning ordinance, and it's not all that recent anymore, but it's been at least 15 years, was this concept of conditional zoning. And it was a tool intended to help both property owners and the community really be able to give them flexibility to deal with the issues that we just talked about, that you don't know what you're getting. There could be all sorts of issues that the parties could address in a rezoning, but you couldn't do before because you weren't allowed to do that before. They always said contract zoning was illegal. And this is sort of a form of contract zoning. So under conditional zoning, a property owner can offer conditions that would run with the land. It's put into an agreement, it's drafted and signed by the parties, it's recorded against the property, and it runs against this property whether Mr. Kearns owns it or doesn't own it in the future, forever, unless changed by the community. It would require a mutual change. So what are the conditions that we offered? We looked at some of the comments that the Planning Commission had and our neighbors in that regard. And again, most of the neighbors really weren't abutting us. They're sort of remote from our property, from what I can tell. But what we agreed to do is do this. The township was concerned about all of the property because it's a very large piece of property and we're only going to use a part of it. We're going to use the rear part of it. So what we did is we committed that we're going to divide up the property into 3 parcels. The front 2 parcels will be on Kearns Road, and they're sized in such a way that you can't have anything huge or negative. You can't have some like major warehouse operation or anything like that. And we've agreed that the properties will be used, those properties can be used for a master planned use of some sort. So it's possible, we didn't want to restrict it to industrial, so it's possible somebody may come in and want to put a medical office building or professional building or a restaurant. They would still have to come to you to actually get the property approved for that. But we wanted to make it clear that there are many opportunities here. And we wanted to put the properties in a configuration to do that. The second thing, which I think is critical, we looked at the industrial uses that were in your ordinance and really struck out the things that just didn't really seem appropriate, were the most negative uses that if you were industrial, you could use as a matter of right. And so the conditions that we offer take away those uses. And again, those uses would be barred from all of the property, not just the back of the property, but all of the property forever. The other thing we did is we have a fair amount of wetlands on the property, natural features that really buffer the property from neighbors. So we're prepared to put those wetlands and natural features into a conservation easement that'll be recorded against the property, run with the land, never can be developed or impacted in that way. So that's another condition we offered. And finally, well, two more conditions. We also committed to the specific location of the towing facility. And not only the location, the setbacks from each property line. So for that back property, this is what you're going to get, and this is where it's going to be located. And, so you could visually see where it is in relationship to our neighboring property in that regard. And finally, I think this was another concern that anybody had. We're doing this. I mean, Mr. Kearns wants to buy this property for his business operation. I mean, he needs to be in this location or somewhere near here. It has great proximity to the highway. It's close to the townships and areas and the roads that he serves. But we made the condition that if he doesn't close on the property, within a certain period of time, he doesn't buy it, then the zoning automatically reverts to the agricultural zoning. You don't have to do anything. It automatically reverts. That's a fairly typical provision that I've seen in conditional rezonings. The other thing I do want to comment, one more comment, and then I should let everybody else speak, is that there have been some comments that, well, outdoor storage is not consistent with the master plan designation of mixed use. And I understand that. And in my reading of the staff report is that that's really not all that clear what that means or what's that intended to mean, because we don't view that as really applicable here, because number one, we're not storing materials and equipment. We're parking vehicles. And for example, if this were zoned to another use allowed, like commercial in the same mixed use district, you're allowed to have car dealerships and used car dealerships, and they park cars that are sitting there probably a lot longer than the cars that we'll have sitting in our parking lot. And again, it's a pretty small parking lot in that regard. And this is not a junkyard. You should know that. That's not what this is. That's not his business. We don't work on the vehicles. We don't do anything with the vehicles. For all we care, every vehicle we go and deal with on the road goes elsewhere, but sometimes there's no place for them to be brought initially. So I wanted to make that very clear. And I also want to say too, that the conditional rezoning, I gave you a conditional rezoning agreement. I tried to draft it in a way that I've done with other municipalities and their lawyers. But you guys might have some other ideas, or your attorney may have some other ideas. So the process would be is that we're absolutely willing, to work with staff and your attorney if this were to move forward and work on that agreement and tweak that agreement before it gets to the board. Because by the time it gets to the board, it should be recommended in one form or another. So I thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions. As I said, we've got our engineer planner here who's designed the project. We have the applicant here, and I also have the broker here who actually has been listing this property for, I think, over 8 years. And, without any other success in terms of finding a user for the project. There are a lot of failed users for the project, I understand. And he actually knows the property, I think, like the back of his hand. So if you have any questions about the land itself, he can answer it. I thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Alan. And
Thank you.
I liked how you laid out the conditions. That's very helpful. One other thing I wanted to just put out there for process sake, and he had mentioned it, and just to reiterate it. So with a conditional rezoning, this is something we either recommend or don't recommend to the township board. Then the board has its own action that it does or does not take. And then the site plan actually, in a normal process, wouldn't come right away. But in this case, with the conditional, the site plan is, as you can see from the agenda, also on the agenda because it runs parallel. So it's a little different than a normal rezoning, but also gives us that opportunity to focus singularly on one project. So just wanted to lay that out there so folks understand. So process-wise, I'm going to open it up to public comment. If you have questions for Greenspan or the applicant, certainly state those questions. I'll ask him to write down those that he has answers for, or wants to answer. And then when we're done with public comment, we'll close the public hearing and we'll get into a discussion with the board. And we can try to answer some of those questions, or maybe the board members ask the same questions. So that's the way we'll do it to keep everything in order. We got a lot of folks tonight, so we're going to limit this to 2 to 3 minutes. I will say up front that we've received numerous letters, and every one of them that you sent into the township, whether it's to Amanda Nimke or to anyone in the township office, they have gotten over to us. And the planning commission members have had those letters, sometimes up to the minute from when you sent them in, they get into our hands. So thank you for those. They're helpful, and it certainly is easier for us to digest those ahead of time than just in the 2 to 3 minutes. So appreciate that. So I'm going to start going through the hands I see raised, and knowing that not everyone knows how to do that, I'll also take pause once all the hands are down. So I'm going to start with my promise was to the Porter name that's up there on the screen, and then I'll go. I see Alex, your hands up, Sandra. So we'll go down through the list again. 2 to 3 minutes would be appreciated, and we'll get through as many of these as we can. All right, let's start off with a Porter hand. I'll give you a chance to unmute and take the floor.
Yes. Our names are Zachary and Mandy Porter. We live here on 18100 Garvey Road. And just as back in March, we still greatly disapprove of any land being rezoned to industrial. Just like all of our neighbors that I've already spoke with, we all agree that, the families who have lived here for decades, we don't want any sort of industrial buildings. I reviewed what it said about conditions on those front lots, and that's still a big question mark. Like nobody likes question marks, right? So the fact that we still wouldn't know what would go in there, none of us still do not like that. I also think it would be a great idea for a full traffic study to be done still on Old 12 and Pierce Road intersections. That intersection down there is already extremely dangerous, and there's been, I believe, it was like 80 accidents last year down there at Pierce and Old 12. Also, the concern whether the bridge on Woods Creek could withstand an uptick of heavy duty vehicles. There was a comment back in March about like multiple 18-wheelers going up and down Pierce Road every day. I did my own research on that, and on any given month, it was maybe averaging about 4 18-wheelers that went up Pierce Road. So I don't think that's that many. And then I would like to end with, there were inappropriate comments made back in March regarding my biggest concern about this going in so close to our home, which is our 4-year-old daughter who has Pura syndrome. And there was very negative and belittling comments about my daughter. And I just want anyone who's listening to know that if anyone has any concerns about my daughter and her special needs, that they can come talk to me anytime they want. I also don't think that railroad tracks is a significant buffer from a heavy industrial business to several homes. There's literally corn on all of that property. There is no buffer. I don't know who says that a railroad tracks is a significant buffer to homes where children live, but I disagree. And I would like to thank the board very much for allowing me to talk tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you again. We know you were here before, so we will move on to Alex Reuter. Got that right?
Yeah, that was good. I appreciate your time, Commissioner, and the other members of the board here tonight. I am attorney Alex Reuter from Myers and Myers. We're a law firm in Howell, not too far away, and I represent a couple of residents in the area, Renee and Kevin Townsend. They're also here tonight, and I expect that they will be looking to speak as well. My goal for this conversation is to touch on some of the legal aspects that were brought up and that deal with the application specifically. So I guess with that being said, I want to address a couple of things that I believe it's Mr. Green, Alan Green, that he's the attorney for the applicant. He had mentioned first and foremost is just the overall business desires of Mr. Kearns. And while I can appreciate that the services he provides, there's no reason to believe that there's a particularized need for this towing yard to go in at this specific property. And that's actually an interesting argument to make, because if that's the basis for the application, this need, or if that's the basis for a decision in favor of the application, then we're talking about something different. And at that point, we're talking about either a condemnation or regulatory taking. And in either of those two cases, you would have procedures going forward after that point in time. It's no longer a rezoning if we are really basing this on a need of the public. So with that being said, and I guess just finalizing that point, the personalized business needs of Mr. Kearns, while they may be, great and all of that, that really has no legal bearing whatsoever on a request for a conditional rezoning. I think that could not be overstated. And that's, again, not to take anything away from what he does, but for the purposes of this hearing, the focus needs to be on the elements that are actually relevant. So with that being said, when we look at industrial zoning, which is the request here, under the township's ordinance, we are permitted in industrial areas to store products or equipment, possibly vehicles, under a special use permit. So when we look at the master plan for this area, we know that it's planned for MU or mixed use zoning. And under that mixed use zoning designation, we know, according to the plan, that a outdoor storage of either wrecked or towed vehicles is not, and capitalized not, compatible with the mixed use designation in the master plan itself. And that's one of the factors that go into considering a rezoning request is the master plan and the consistency with that master plan. But that's not the only consideration, right? Even if this were fully consistent with the master plan, the law sets forth additional factors that need to be considered. And the master plan itself recognizes this, and I'm quoting here. It says, it's important to note that the master plan and accompanying maps do not replace other township ordinances, specifically the zoning ordinance and map. So we got to look beyond what's just stated in the master plan. And again, that's reiterated by Michigan law, which is very clear that one of the main factors that should be considered is the consistency and compatibility with general land use patterns in the area. And Michigan courts have time and time again said that that's a main consideration in determining whether or not a rezoning request or an original zoning is lawful. So if we apply that standard, the standard being consistency and compatibility with the general land use, really what we're talking about there is going out to the property and walking around in a circle and looking at, what's the layout here? What are the surrounding properties look like? What's the use being accomplished at these other properties? And when you do that, it's very clear that an industrial zoned land would be nowhere near compatible with the residential and agricultural uses of every single surrounding contiguous property and most every other property within a very large square foot area around that subject parcel. And just briefly, my understanding was that this public hearing right now is just about the rezoning, and if an action is taken, we may address the special use and site plan later on. Okay,
That's correct. Yep.
all right, I will just quickly breeze through the rest of this then, and if that becomes necessary, I would just ask additional comment be taken and allowed by myself, and I'm sure the other people here. So one of the other things too, that I'm sure you're going to hear from, the residents and concerned citizens about this request is the very significant and real environmental concerns associated with, the materials and products of the vehicles stored on the property. The fact that, this is designed, or the plan is to design this as a place where wrecked vehicles go. We don't know what they're leaking, what they're putting into the soil. We don't know what kind of fumes they have. We don't really even know the severity of the traffic impacts. We do know it's going to impact traffic, as every development does. But the degree to which it does impact traffic is a major concern. And I think that was even mentioned by Ms. Porter. Maybe I'm assuming too much that it was a miss, but it sounded like it. But going back to rezoning, and with respect to the conditions that are offered by the applicant, I want to point out that, of course, there's certain areas in any municipality where, it's appropriate, or they can accommodate industrial zoning districts. But this area and this subject property is most certainly not that. And the conditions that are proposed do nothing to address all of the concerns that have been raised in the past and that are going to be raised this evening, by the voices of the people who are most impacted by an industrial rezoning. One of the things that I emphasized in my letter was the differences between some of the dimensional lot size requirements or limitations set forth in the ordinance, comparing those between agricultural, which is what the property is zoned now, versus industrial, which is what they're trying to get. So just looking at the lot area, 1 acre for any building in industrial zone property, that's a 50% reduction from agricultural. The lot width is a 33% reduction compared to agricultural. Lot coverage, a 300% increase compared to agricultural. In other words, you can have a building that's 300 times the size of, or 300% bigger than a building allowed on agricultural or residential property. The same is true of the floor area, but as opposed to 300%, it's 600%. And then the side yard setbacks and the rear yard setbacks, that's 50 and 43% reductions as compared to agricultural respectively. All right, one final point, and then I will move along, because I know that you guys have a lot of voices to hear, but in my letter, and I'm assuming that you guys got my letter that I had submitted, but I quoted language from the Michigan Supreme Court in describing situations exactly like what we have here, where industrial rezoning is being attempted in an area primarily residential and agricultural land use. And here's the quote: "The entire or partial intrusion by means of rezoning of an industrial district upon an established residence district amounts more and more in these days of constantly increased irritation caused by highway traffic, the noise that annoys, and the industrial fouling of nearby atmosphere, to that which merely is a right thing in or too near the wrong place. In other words, like a pig in the parlor instead of the barnyard." So with the conditions being offered by the applicant, I would emphasize that, it doesn't really matter how much you dress up or try to disguise a pig. At the end of the day, it is still a pig that belongs in the barnyard and not in the parlor, or in other words, an agricultural residential area. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And yeah, we did get the letter, and appreciate that. I'm going to try to zoom through here a little bit. Sandra Egler, at least that's the name on the screen. Could be something else. So tell me your name and where you're at.
You got it right. My name is Sandy Egler. I'm at 18100 Garvey Road. First, I would like to say that our property most certainly butts up to this. The only thing between us is Garvey Road and the railroad tracks. It's basically in my front yard. Nobody's going to want to buy my house with that sitting in their front yard. And I know all of the neighbors feel the same way. What I think the board needs to focus on is that the master plan specifically says nothing automotive, because you don't want the fluid leaking into Lutz Creek. If you allow this to go there, somewhere down the road, there's gonna be an environmental problem in Letts Creek because of this tow yard. There's no way to prevent that if you allow it in. My final point is this. The applicant has 50 acres for sale, and it's mixed use. If they really want this tow yard to go there, then it should be put down right by the highway on other property that the applicant owns, which would be close to their junkyard business. And I'm sorry, my final point is this. The master plan says mixed use. I work for another township in this county. Typically, mixed use, the entire site plan comes in to show what's going to be where. This is just, no, we're just going to take half of it or more than half of it, and we're going to change all the zoning to industrial. That's not mixed use. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Tom Atkinson is next.
Hi there. Thank you very much. I'm Tom Atkinson. I live at 1001 Pierce Road. And I will also point out that my property does abut right on this. I'm looking out the window. I'm looking at the property across the street right over there. You know, the statements from the lawyer that a lot of these objections are not from abutting is incorrect in a lot of cases. And as Alex Reuter said, I don't think anybody's saying that this is not a necessary service. It is a necessary service. The question is this the right place to locate this service in this rural and a rural residential area? Some of the argument or some of the questions that came up at the last meeting in March, that this does not in fact comply with the master plan, I don't think the applicant has really addressed. He's kind of ignored. It says, and I'm looking at, quoting page 48 of the master plan, automotive service stations and heavy automotive repair are not compatible with the mixed use category. A tow yard is automotive service. They are servicing automobiles that cannot run themselves. And any use which requires the need for outdoor storage is not compatible with the mixed use designation. And again, the emphasis of not is from the master plan. And this is, quite obviously outdoor storage. He tried to say that, they'll only be there for a few days. So it's not really outdoor storage. It's just short term. But if there's always cars there, even if each individual car is only there for a few days, it's still there. There's still wrecked cars there 100% of the time, leaking fluids into this gravel parking lot that is adjacent to the watershed. Looking at their site plan, they say it's very, limited to the number of cars are going to be there. Looking at the map that they put down, they have 51 spaces in that gravel parking lot for their the tow yard. That's 51 space for 51 wrecked vehicles. To me, that's not very small. And so I'm kind of questioning, the information there. That's a pretty sizable lot. And then I guess the last part, comment that I want to make, they're saying that and bringing all these other examples of what can go into mixed use. And it sounds like they keep referring to table 6 on page 51 of the master plan, which lists several different categories of zoning that could potentially be there. But they don't, but this, doesn't look at what the actual text of the master plan says. Master plan, if you look at page 48, it's got the intent and description sections. And it talks about general retail, service, office establishments are the primary uses envisioned for this area. Mixed use developments may also include more intensive commercial businesses as well as office research and light industrial operations. So that's partially, it can include light industrial, but it's not just rezoning the entire thing as industrial. And all these comments were made back in March. There was discussion on this back in March. Planning Commission members raised these same questions. They talked about, the outdoor storage clause was very thoughtfully and specifically put in there to keep that kind of thing from happening. And that seems to have been kind of ignored by the applicant. The outdoor storage is a core component of their business plan. So for these reasons, I don't think that this complies with the Sylvan Township Master Plan. And that right there is justification for the township not to approve this rezoning. I guess that's it for my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. And I am going to move to the next one, which is Dan Russell. You muted, Dan? Maybe? I'll keep you in queue just in case you fell off my screen there for a minute. Let's go to Kevin Townsend, and then if Dan, if you want to come back, put your hand up, I'll get you. Kevin?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate your time and attention today. Very important issue to many people, as you guys know. I had some comments prepared, but I want to deviate a little bit and go address some of Mr. Green's comments, which I really was sort of perplexed by some of the points he was trying to make. I'm going to take a risk and use a prop here. He mentioned 50% of fatalities occur at the site after the initial incident. I was returning from a coffee run the other day. This is at, I don't know if you can see it, it's at 7-Eleven on Tuesday morning this week. And this is 2 cars in the middle of Pierce and Old 12. Forgive me for moving around here a little bit. There's the intersection, Pierce and Old 12. Happy to share this photo with anybody that would like a copy of it. Thank goodness no one was hurt. I don't know if I would use this as a demonstration if somebody was hurt in this situation. There's a gentleman standing on his phone outside of his car. Another gentleman you can't see behind this vehicle on his phone out in the middle of the intersection. This just happened this week, guys. This is Pierce and Old US 12. I'm not making this up. Again, happy to send you this photo. This is a very dangerous intersection. You can verify the numbers and what are the accurate, true numbers. It's been submitted in letters to the board by neighbors on Spruce Run here. The other thing that this just kind of makes me stop in my tracks here is that this is a school bus route that is traveled multiple times per day. You have a dangerous intersection that's only going to be made more dangerous by flatbed tow trucks carrying often heavy vehicles that aren't going to be able to accelerate out of the way of the oncoming traffic that's going 65, sometimes 65 miles an hour across Old US 12. Anybody who has been on that road will know I'm speaking the truth here. There's a hidden curve that goes under the I-94 overpass, which makes it even more dangerous. There are school bus stops on all roads feeding the proposed business. So Garvey, Pierce, Old US 12, Kavanaugh Lake Road. These are all school bus stop routes. And we're going to introduce another layer of danger, putting our kids in the community in danger. That should be a hard stop. And really, it would be a bad decision to go that direction. Another safety consideration, I feel compelled to introduce something new because I know a lot of these points are going to get restated. And that's just because people are very passionate and we all are thinking the same thing. So they must be important points. Another safety consideration that we haven't talked about yet is that in the winter, Pierce is a north-south road. I don't know if the engineers that have looked into the site plan here have addressed this. Pierce is a north-south road. There is all open land to the west. Anybody who knows that situation in Michigan knows.
Kevin, you're muted.
Sorry, I don't know how to, was I on mute all this time?
No.
It's 5 seconds.
5 seconds, you
Oh.
flipped off when someone came in and we were muting them. So you're good.
I thought
Keep
I was on a roll. That would have been horrible.
Yeah, no, you're,
energy.
we didn't miss anything. Just, you got, well, 1 minute left and
All right,
Go
I
for
just
it.
asked for a little bit of leniency on the time, given the time that Mr. Green took. Yeah, so that's always a treacherous, snowy, icy road in the wintertime, and we're going to introduce a heavy flatbed truck on that. Proximity, the proximity issue was brought up by Mr. Green, addressing that comment. The best proximity in this property would be to take this business and put it all the way over by the house that sits right on Old US 12 and Pierce Road. That's the closest you could possibly get to the freeway without being the actual house on Pierce and Old US 12. He said this property is screened by surrounding natural features. You cannot screen something from elevated surrounding land. And one of the letters that was submitted to the board said, please come out to Spruce Run Drive. We invite you to come up on a hill and look down onto this land. My wife and I take a 2-mile walk every day after dinner. We look right down on this beautiful land that's going to become a tow yard with a bunch of vehicles out. And again, the environmental impact, it will happen. It's not an if, it's a when. Crashed vehicles. Mr. Green didn't mention that this outdoor storage is not just outdoor storage. It's outdoor storage of wrecked vehicles leaking toxic substances, antifreeze, propylene glycol, ethylene glycol, motor oils, transmission fluids, brake fluids, you name it. You go onto the Michigan.gov website, it talks about antifreeze leaching cadmium, lead, and benzene from the vehicles themselves. The first thing that typically leaks out of a vehicle that's been wrecked, as we know, is the antifreeze, right? This is going to be going into the ground. Rainwater runoff is going to go right into Letts Creek. That's what rain does. That's why creeks form, right? It's going to be in Letts Creek, and this is adjacent to a wellhead protection area. And it would be really, really cataclysmic to start having these materials showing up in wells. We know the arsenic problems that are in other areas of this community. That's really, it's so well known that people have a hard time selling their property, knowing that their wells are contaminated with arsenic. So those points, I thank you for the extra time. This decision has a big impact on the community. It also has a big impact on the legacy of the members of these commissions and these boards that are going to vote on it. So you guys are leaving a legacy with this vote and this decision. I would ask that you vote against this bad idea, this proposed rezoning. Thank you.
thanks, Kevin. Dan is back, and this time, take two, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. Little technical error over here. I'm a Sylvan Township resident. I got 2 points to make. One is, well, so in my 20s, I worked for 2 different towing companies, and it was said that the tow yards aren't typically filled with cars because they go somewhere else immediately. What the tow yards get filled with are the abandoned vehicles along the expressway that clearly nobody wants anymore, right? And or accidents that are just regular old accidents. The only time accident cars get towed to a police station or post is if they're under some sort of investigation. And that's pretty rare, 1 out of 100 cars kind of thing. That's sort of my towing history. I've since moved on, but my second part would be sort of want to come at this, and I agree with everything that's been said, mostly 1000%. But the shared driveway thing sort of creeps up again here, where I was at the meeting about 2 years ago where the shared driveway ordinance was passed through quickly, almost overnight, without any public comment. The agenda stated it was for driveway permits, and I was at the meeting that night, and there was only 10 or so people in the audience, and it turned out to be a shared driveway per permit ordinance. That got shoved through that night without any public comment, without anything. It seemed like half of the commission wanted to talk about it a little more with the residents, but it had to be pushed through because we needed it. Carol said that there's a lot of people waiting to use this to fix problems that have crept up in the past. And I was assured that this was only going to be used in cases where something that was an old land purchase, and because of changes, they needed access to their land, and the shared driveway ordinance was only going to be used to fix those issues. And that's how they got it passed through the police, the police power version of this ordinance. Well, that didn't get used for 18 months. Okay. And there's only been one or two so far that have been permits that have been applied for. And now this construction project is asking for an industrial version of a shared driveway permit. And that's where I'm coming at this thing, where it's just like, it's being used for a development, not to protect people and property. And those were the sort of pretenses that this was passed under. So that's my sort of wrinkle in this whole thing. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the comments, both from your experience and also on the shared driveway. Just a procedural note, it helped me actually to have that background, because that wasn't taken up by the planning commission. That was purely the board and the police power. And it was one of my questions tonight. So thanks for thanks for doing that. Okay, I'm going to run on to John Brooks real quickly. John, you're next up. If you come off mute. Let's see if I can help you here.
Hear me?
There you are. Go for it.
A quick anecdotal comment here. I bought this house because what? Hello?
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. I bought this house because the previous owner died down at that intersection due to a traffic accident. That's the only anecdotal comment I wanted to make. So it's a dangerous intersection. Okay.
Yes, John, appreciate it. Thank you. Patrick is next up.
Thank you. I think we've heard some really good points expressed tonight. I just want to say that first. And I think what we really need when it comes to the environmental concerns or the traffic concerns or the noise concerns, and maybe others, is some sense of quantification of what these things are. I can't provide that quantification. I'm not an expert. But questions like how many tow truck runs are going to be running per day? How many are going to be running per night, especially? How does the applicant plan to mitigate the effect of hazardous fluids, potentially? I think anybody doing this who's responsible needs to answer these questions and be able to substantiate their answers. I have no idea how much environmental fluids it takes to spoil a creek. It might not be very much. And how noisy are these tow trucks when they operate at night? Are they going to have their backup signal sounds running in the middle of the night? It's really quiet at night. So any kind of noise like that could be a big deal. I'm not trying to prejudge the results of this, but I think that it ought to be decided on material facts that actually impact the people surrounding the area, and actually nothing else, in my view. But some of these things really have to be quantified, and I haven't heard a quantification of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. I am going to go next to L. Whiteman. is the screen name. I'm sure there's a better name behind that.
Okay, this is Roger Heyman,
There you go.
her husband, 1185 Pierce Road. Outdoor storage isn't supposed to be permitted. This doesn't fit our area, so I'm against it. But I want Mr. Kern to feel like, to continue to be successful and to feel welcome to Chelsea. So I've been looking for someplace else that he could put this. And I found one spot, but it was too far away from the expressway. But more recently, I found that out where Lloyd Bridges has built his new motorhome facility, Lloyd Bridges East on I-94 along Old US 12. There's already outdoor storage there. There's the storage facility there with outdoor storage on the side road. And most recently, Kern Auto Sales and Service, which has nothing to do with Mr. Kern's towing, which currently is up at the gas station at 94 and 52. They have gotten Lima Township special use approval to put a used car lot out there and build a steel building to put their service center in. So it seems like Mr. Kern's towing facility would fit in just fine out there, that he could go out there and purchase land and put that in using his plan that he's already got made up. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And the other thing is there's an exit right there. There's an exit ramp right there for him. It's closer than what he's going to now. To
Right.
that end.
Thank you. Mike Van Goor is next.
Thank you. I appreciate the ability to address the Planning Commission this evening. Our concerns kind of fall into three categories. First certainly is the zoning concerns. When I began my architectural career 31 years ago and presented my first project to the Planning Commission, I was keenly aware that the zoning ordinances and master plans are in place for the protection of property owners and to control inappropriate uses that would negatively impact adjacent uses and districts. I think we've all heard this evening that the proposed development and proposed rezoning would have a negative impact just based on the incongruent use of that property, proposed use of that property with the residential neighborhood around the perimeter. I know that Mr. Green had stated that in his letter that Mr. Kern's proposed use is well separated and screened from any neighboring land uses. This is clearly not the case. The project narrative doesn't even address anybody that is to the north of Garvey Road and specifically Spruce Run Drive, which is where we live. Given the topography change, we would be looking right directly down into the impound lot. So it is not appropriately screened. Letts Creek is not a visual or sound barrier, neither is the railroad or any other the high tension wires that are stated in his letter either. And obviously we've already heard discussion about the outdoor storage, so I won't take anybody's time to further talk about that, but I do echo those concerns. Traffic has already been discussed, the dangerous corner, so I'm not gonna go further there other than say we support those concerns as well. Our second concern are environmental concerns. And to address Patrick's comment, he didn't know how much contaminant would take to pollute water. A standard measure of oil pollution in water is 10 parts per million. The weight of a gallon of water is about 4,540 grams. A drop of oil weighs about 0.02 grams. So one drop of oil in a gallon of water would be 0.2 grams per 4540. Or if you equate that out, it's 1 gram in 225,000 grams of water, which is 4 parts per million. That means it would take 2.5 drops of oil to pollute 1 gallon of water. 1 liter of oil would contaminate 1 million liters of water. So if you look at the slope arrows rather, on the grading plan that was presented in this conditional rezoning, all of the sloping topography from the impound lot would go directly down and include the parking area by the building, directly down and in the swales along the drive and directly to the wetland boundary, which is running in the center of this property. The Letts Creek and the wetlands are a natural feature of this township. And just the simple runoff that I've just illustrated will have a devastating effect, not only for the wetlands, but also for Letts Creek, and which will only mitigate finally into the aquifer and affecting our wells and the wellhead for the water tower as well. And finally, there's certainly the personal concerns. We've already heard tonight about people concerned about the property values. Same here. You know, we purchased property here 28 years ago. We've paid our taxes. We've burdened the increase in taxes based on the water tower that has been imposed on us. We've raised our family here. We've made a life here. We look forward to retiring here. This is certainly something that would negatively impact that. As Kevin was saying, he walks down our road. Garvey is used by many people to bike, walk their dogs. Children ride their bikes down the road. It's been mentioned this is a bus route. It really seems that this is incompatible use for this area. And while industrial uses may be mentioned in the master plan, that doesn't mean that it must be the appropriate use for this area. That has to be taken into consideration. And, we strongly object to this proposed rezoning. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. All right, my hands are done. I'm going to go and make some pause here for some folks to come on board. I do remind you we've got to keep the time a little bit here. So if you've already spoken, or if you're coming back to speak, just anyone, 2 to 3 minutes. I'm gonna have to start getting a little hard with the time here. So Dickinson is the next person up.
Yeah, he might not call on me.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
So the environmental issues are all valid and all a concern, but what concerns me even more is in the future, there's going to be more cars with batteries, not less. So we're concerned with glycol and motor oil, but the stuff that comes out of the batteries of an electric vehicle is far worse. And I just think you guys need to consider that as well. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. L. Whiteman, I know one of you spoke, but I know there's 2 of you there. So if you could keep it brief.
Yes, this is Lois Whiteman. I'm on Pierce Road. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. I would just like, I echo, I think what everyone has said so far tonight, the residents. I don't think this is an appropriate use in this neighborhood. And I would like the board to consider things that were said also at the March meeting, because things haven't changed that much. They're still asking for rezoning to industrial. The 2 other parcels will also be industrial, even though some uses would be restricted. But last time I counted from my notes that there were at least 16 people that spoke against the rezoning. There were 25 signatures on letters urging you not to consider the rezoning. There were 12 more letters sent individually opposing this. And my letter was not in the group that I saw there. I don't know why. I couldn't find it, the one that I sent in March. But the overriding concerns are against this for all the reasons that have been mentioned: noise, traffic, environment, not compatible with the area, unattractive. So I don't have anything more to add except my strong support for the other people that have spoken this evening. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, we've got no more hands. So does anyone else want to speak that maybe didn't find the button? I know on certain mobile devices, it's hard to raise your hand. So I'll give you a few minutes. Hearing none. Okay, now a mute button's going off. I will, Just take-
Excuse me, Paul Knaffel was waving his hand.
waving, I can't see waving all the
I-
time.
I know, sorry,
Yeah,
I thought I mentioned it.
I appreciate that.
Thanks, Paul,
I
go
actually-
for it.
I couldn't find how to raise your hand on here.
Don't worry about it.
So, but I would actually be with all of my neighbors and not thinking this is a great idea. And I don't think there's a single person who would choose to buy a home right next to a junkyard unless or a tow yard, unless they were not able to afford anything else. So it seems really wrong to impose that on those folks that have bought and have lived in the neighborhood, and every other reason that I heard here was extremely valid, and I stand with those neighbors.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Yeah, because I certainly have to look at the list here and sometimes I don't see everyone's face. So speak up if you need to, but I do want to try to move on a little bit. We got a lot of discussion we have to do between planning commission members and the applicant, but we don't give everybody a chance to speak.
Dave, I don't have a raise hand option, but I would like
Okay.
to comment.
Go for it.
Thank you. I certainly don't want to beat any dead horses.
I'm sorry, name and just street or wherever you're at.
Yeah, so I'm Connor Townsend. I'm on Spruce Run Drive. I'm the son of Kevin and Renee Townsend, who are here, neighbor of Mike and Laura Van Gore and the Rothamels and everyone down on Spruce Run Drive. Great points have been made by everyone, and I certainly agree with all of my neighbors. I think it's just important as we wrap up here to have the proper framing of the parties involved here. We've got a community of, it seems, 40 to 50 people who vehemently do not want this industrial, potentially hazardous eyesore in their backyard. And on the other side, we've got a businessman from Manchester and his associates who are not going to be living next to this thing. And I certainly do not, I certainly believe in everyone's right to make a buck and to, serve their communities in the way they see fit for themselves. But I thought it was unfortunate when Mr. Khan made some comments about our community and about NIMBYism, as he put it, in the paper. And I think it's important to remember that the job of this committee, NIMBYism, for those who don't know, stands for Not in My Backyard, and it's used derogatorily. It's never a positive thing to get labeled as a NIMBYist, right? But I think it's important to remember that the job of this committee is to plan what our backyards are going to look like. So if it's the wishes of this community that something like a tow yard that is potentially leaking hazardous materials into a watershed area, that is going to create excess traffic of large vehicles, unsightly outdoor storage of tarnished vehicles, not go in their backyard, then that's what the committee should follow, not the wishes of a businessman who lives in Manchester. And I thought these comments were especially unfortunate because I grew up with Charlie's nephew, Ryan. Ryan's a great kid. I loved Ryan, played baseball with him, played basketball and stuff during recess. And in my backyard, those are the kinds of kids that I enjoyed, this rural setting that we have out here. And, the master plan talks about, its chief goal is to not change the overall character of this area. And so I think it would be really unfortunate if this planning committee chose to go against the wishes of what happens in the backyards of this community.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate it. And just as a general reminder, we try to keep all comments limited to just the proposals at hand. Robert's Rules of Order is what we go by in the committee, and there's some specific things around just making sure we don't talk personally on either side of any side. So, but passion is passion, and I get it. So appreciate everyone's comments. Is there anyone else who wants to talk specifically about the proposal before we get into more discussion? Commission members. So, all right. Not hearing any, I'm going to close the public hearing and move on to the portion where the planning commission members go into discussion and obviously ask questions. Mr. Green, after hearing the folks who spoke and reading the letters, we heard a lot of the same themes coming up. So I think I'm going to allow planning commission members to ask the applicant those questions directly instead of having a sort of back and forth. So when I can certainly start out. What I want to remind the planning commission members as we begin to deliberate is that there are two things before us. One is a site plan and one is a rezoning conditional with the site plan. So it's a little confusing. But I think what we need to do is really focus in on, and I think a lot of the commentators were very well stated in this, that we have to focus in on this rezoning with this specific use, which is better than saying a rezoning where it could be 100 different uses. But in so doing, we have to look first at the master plan and ask ourselves, is it congruent with that plan? And then we have to look at, is it congruent with zoning around it, and does it fit what we planned when we put it into the master plan? And then there's certainly a lot of other issues underneath that, but I think if we start with some of those big areas, it'll help focus our attention and our discussion. So I'm going to open it up first to planning commission members to throw your questions on the table, and then I'll let Mr. Green or the applicant sort of answer those questions. Unless Carol, certainly feel free to butt in here if there's something we're missing. I don't think we need to go in the engineering report, because the engineering report is really about the site plan at this point. And unless I missed something, you certainly bring that up. And if I look at Carol's report, I think she reiterates what I just said, which is we have to look at the factors she has listed, such as, is it harmonious with the master plan? Is it, and all these other, and we can go through them one by one, but I just want to open up for major questions first. I have a few, but I'll save mine. So. And Leah, I see that you're here, so thank you.
Yep, finally.
So Dawn, Sandy, Steve, Tom.
Yeah, Dave.
Yep.
I guess one of my concerns is the aspect of the pollution that everybody's brought up. That seems to be my big concern. And the runoff to Letts Creek. I'm wondering what the applicant has to say about what they would do to prevent that.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I guess I'll start, and maybe Kathy or Bill Kearns can add to it. They are a couple things about that, because I've talked about that with Bill. First of all, he's never had an environmental issue with his other facility or any other facility has had. It's gonna involve proper stormwater design, which is, there's not going to be supposed to be an opportunity for anything, if there was any runoff, to get into any wetland or creek in that regard. He is, as I understand it, he is regulated by the county, and the county comes out and inspects his facilities with respect to those kinds of issues. So, I guess I understand the concern that the folks are raising, but there's never been any situation in his operations where there ever has been a problem. And it's not something that's unregulated as well. And proper design should take care of that. Like any, if you had a trucking operation or a warehousing operation, if this were an Amazon facility out there and you had, hundreds of trucks every day, each of which could be leaking and everything, it's dealt with by proper stormwater management and design. to my knowledge, but I'm not an engineer, so I'm only giving you my understanding.
Yeah, and Kathy, can you address that? Because and I did read through, I saw the site plan and I read the Midwest's report back on it, and obviously the state has some something to do with regulating the wetland impact and yeah, but can you talk about the runoff as it is in this site plan and how that goes through? There's a detention basin, and then is there any filtering or any catch basin for that stuff?
Sure. So there is a detention pond shown on the current site plan. I think there were some statements made during the public comment that there would be runoff directly to Letts Creek, and that's not true. All of the water from the site is collected. There is no direct runoff. Everything is collected through a ditch system and a piped storm sewer system, and then it's sent into the detention pond. And we have unlimited almost ability to make that pond as big as we want. We're only using a very small portion of the property. We do have the capacity to make it so that the pond can hold what's referred to as back-to-back 100-year storms, and then it wouldn't even need to have an outlet. We could just store the water there, and there would be no outlet. So the water would never even leave the pond and go to the Letts Creek or to the wetland. And as Mr. Green stated, there are controls, there are regulations. It is monitored by the county. It's also monitored by the state, and we would have to meet all of the requirements of those regulatory bodies for this project.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it. That's exactly what I was looking for in terms of explanation. Other questions, or Steve, if that didn't answer it, any follow-ups to that?
No, I'm fine. That was what I wanted to hear.
Okay. Let's see, Dawn. I know, Dawn, you always bring a list to these things, so. Are you muted? Let's see for a second here.
Sorry about that. Let's just hope the dog doesn't start barking.
There you are.
I've heard a lot of what the public has said, and I appreciate and understand the concerns that they are asking. I guess I would just default to the usual things that I go to, but that's more in the preliminary site plan and the special use in terms of Sue Dickinson's report and the report that Carol Konitsky always does so well for us also. In terms of this particular piece, the two concerns that I have most are that this be compatible with the area that is here, and I'm not sure about that. This is awfully close to residential homes, I understand. I too had some questions regarding the shared driveway. I'm not sure if that's appropriate for us to be questioning.
Absolutely.
I did notice in this contract, there was a mention of potential marijuana as one of the businesses that might be used, that might be put into this place. I think overall, our master plan is pretty clear, and it's been discussed at length tonight about what is appropriate for this particular area and what might not be. I have driven along Pierce Road a lot, and Garvey Road and Spruce Run. I did many times before this project ever came to us, and I've done it now. And it just seems to me very enlightening that this is a much more densely rural, agricultural, rural, residential area than I realized. It's not just open space out in the middle of nowhere. So I do have some concerns about the project being in this location, especially given that there are other areas within Sylvan Township and the immediate area where this would be very appropriate. I don't know about this area, and I hope these comments have been appropriate for this part of the meeting. If they have not, I apologize, but that's my input for tonight.
No, and Dawn, I think they're very appropriate, and we do have some leeway because this is conditional, so it's conditional on the proposed use. So if the proposed use brings up a question as outlined in the agreement or any part of it, you certainly can focus there. So I know the environmental impact and traffic; those are all applicable, but as long as they're applicable to specifically the use that's proposed. So.
Thank you.
Mhm. I don't know. I won't beg and borrow for more members to ask more questions, but I'll start in on mine. So, I think Patrick brought up, said, well, if we could put a number to everything, this whole job would be so much easier. Well, that'd make my job easier every Thursday at the end of the month, but sometimes you can't. But I do want to ask about the traffic situation. When people come to us with residential proposals, whether it's a PUD or whether it's changing the zoning to go from 2 acre lots to 1 acre lots, traffic always seems to come up. In this proposal, we're essentially creating a 3-employee business site. So I want to get my handle on how much traffic. So I guess the question I have for the applicant is, do you have numbers on your average number of runs per day that you're running out of your, because this is a satellite location, which I think was also delineated in the applicant's stuff that we sometimes gets overlooked. Do you have numbers on what this might do in terms of runs per day?
Bill, are you there? Do you want to? I think it's in the, I thought there was some information on that in his, in the description of the business that was attached to the, and I would say this, and I'll let Bill, if he can get it, I know he's there, so.
He's there. We'll get him off mute.
If he could get on, is that, I'm involved in doing traffic reports all the time. This is so low intensity, and you said it, there's 2 or 3 employees, there's two or three tow trucks on a 13-acre site. Normally under the master plan, if you put in any kind of use that would be bigger than that, the amount of traffic would be substantially more, whether it was a warehouse, whether it was a commercial, shopping center or something like that. But we're talking about a pretty large area, 13 acres and 3,600 square foot building with 51 parking lots. The rest of the land is all open space. There's really not much there. And I understand, and don't take this as being critical of anybody's concerned about traffic, but you've got this whole business area that doesn't just include this property, but includes all the property from the railroad tracks to the expressway, almost on both sides of the road, that are slated for business development of some sort. This is a tiny piece of it, with taking 13 acres that would probably generate less traffic than almost any other thing you could do on 13 acres. I mean, if you put in 13 acres of multifamily back there, it would generate, that. I mean, substantially more traffic. So, but hopefully Bill's on and he could talk about the actual use.
I heard him. You there, Bill?
Bill?
If not, I can. And the question can always come back to me too. If you get a hold of him or you text him or whatever.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, I hear what you're saying, and there's no doubt in my mind that intersection is dangerous, and anybody who's ever pulled up to that intersection feels like I'm taking my life in my hands right here, right? And that's an intersection that I think the county and a lot of folks have to look at. But we do need to balance that with that's a major highway off-ramp in our township. And so when we look at that from a master planning, we say, we have sewer and water there. We have the beginnings of businesses running along 12, and then, you have this vacant land that's been for sale forever. And and the person who owns it saying, well, farmers don't want it, and, nothing's worked there. And maybe this isn't the right use, but I think at the end of the day, something sometime is going to go there. And we as a township planning commission just have to figure out, how we make it as best we can, but we balance that with private property rights of people developing too. So I'm just trying to get my handle on, basically what Patrick said. Are there ways to judge some of these things? My big issue is I do go back to the master plan as my guiding document and the way to look at this. And I think in the site plan, there's a lot of things we could tighten up. We can really look at that runoff. We could do some things there. But as far as the master plan, my main issue is the outdoor storage. And I do remember when we went through this section and when we looked at multiple uses, and then we looked at all the zoning underneath those, and there were lots of things in there. But we tried to make it fit with what we're trying to do, which is put that development near water sewer infrastructure, put it near highway access, put it where we're being told that's where it should be when people come to us with other residential plans that neighbors don't like. And so we're trying to balance that out in our master plan. And I think the one thing we put in there around the outdoor storage, that's bothered me since May. That's still a part of the business. I get why it's there, and I get why, you can't really separate the two things. But, as an 8-foot fence around it and temporary cars in and out of it, is that really outdoor storage? I'm sure attorneys will argue long past what we will ever argue about. My time in the legislature, every word we wrote was dissected a million times. So I get that this is a concern, and because it says, what did we mean in that master plan? And what did we mean by outdoor storage? I fully understand what the applicant is saying, that it doesn't necessarily mean, the temporary storage of tow runs. But I also understand what a resident's saying, because to a resident looking across the tracks or whatever it may be, things are being stored there and they're stored outside. I have gone up and down the road several times, especially this past week, just trying to figure out the lay of the land. This isn't an easy one. It really isn't. I think that we as this planning commission body have to base our decision on such legal framework that we can't always just say, oh yeah, no one wants it, or, oh, I don't like this about the site plan, because we can change that, right? So I'm just trying to get a handle on what are those things we can measure towards what we have in the master plan. So those are what I'm struggling with. I know there's no general question there. I think others have asked those things, but that's what I struggle with. So certainly mitigating the environmental impact is job number one. And I think in the planning, the report from Carol, and Carol, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you did question why it would be a unpaved parking area versus paved. Didn't you question that? Was there a land development standard?
The area that was paved, I don't recall that I said that. Are you talking about the area on where they are parking their vehicles?
No, parking the, maybe it was for their employee parking, but I thought it had to do with the storage and back.
I don't recall that I said that, because
Okay.
I believe that area was all paved.
That is all paved. Okay, so I misread it.
Maybe
Glad I
Kathy can correct, Kathy Kindness.
I'm glad I asked.
I believe it was all paved.
Okay.
Is she available?
Yeah, Kathy's there. Is it paved in back and in the front for the employees, or is it just the back?
So it certainly has to be paved in the front, because we have to have ADA compliance, and we have to
Right.
have, the parking spaces have to be a hard surface. The area in the back, I think is still up for discussion, whether it's paved or not. Certainly it needs to be a hard packed gravel surface, some sort of limestone, even if it didn't have pavement on it. But I think that's still up for discussion. And I think Bill is calling in. He lost his internet connection. He texted us, and I think he's trying to call in so that he can possibly address that too. And I'll show you.
So Dave, this is Carol. So I think that issue is separate, with the preliminary site plan.
Yeah, I think it is too. I was just trying to get back to the, just the environmental concern and in my own mind, understanding how that runoff occurs.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And Bill, there's a person on another phone line. That's probably not Bill. Is that Bill?
Can you guys hear me at all?
I can.
There you go. Okay, so I'm on a landline. I haven't used one of these in a long time.
Welcome.
So, I don't know how to mute or unmute from a landline. I missed the last 6, 7, 8 minutes probably. So I apologize.
Well, the one question we threw out early was, I was trying to get a handle on the traffic. So you have 3, 4 employees, it's a satellite location. How many runs are you doing in and out of this place, average per day? Or does that make sense?
You know, I can say for the entire operation. How about that? I don't have any way of singling out a place I don't have yet.
Mhm.
I have tried it for the Chelsea area, going through them one by one, weeding them out. 350 to 400 calls per month.
Okay.
Divide that by 30, 12 a day, 12 to 15. You know, it's busier during the week certainly than on the weekends. Busier during the daytime than evening time.
Yeah, because on your
Servicing all 3 locations.
and that would be all 3 locations. And this location in particular, I think I remember reading this right. It's only staffed until a certain time, and then those folks go home and are on emergency call from home, correct?
That's how we're doing it currently. That's how I anticipate doing it in the next while till needs change, that we need someone at night. Things are changing, and certainly during COVID, nighttime runs have went down dramatically. Really haven't picked up. You know, try to get something to eat in Chelsea after 10 p.m. It's very difficult. So I don't think we have quite the motoring public. Whether it's going to stay that way, I'm not sure. You know, someday we may get a full-time, but not in the next 12 months. I've been doing this for 24 years now. We haven't needed one.
Right.
But I certainly won't say that, you know, it's possible in the future. I'm trying to plan for that. I'm trying to plan for the 10 years.
Okay. No, and that's helpful. I appreciate that. Okay, so basically the way I'm looking at this first part, this conditional rezoning, is compliance with the master plan. And I've already gone over what my concerns are, and it's not an easy and or question. Consistency with the zoning in the general area. I certainly understand when someone walks out and they say, this is a farm field, there's residential houses all around it, you know, but you have to balance that also with why the master plan has the thing it has in there, which is that this is next to a major on-off ramp of I-94. And it is an area where we have water and sewer, and we have development going on Old 12. So arguably, yeah, both sides, I completely understand. It's never easy to take a parcel that's in residential area and change it. And I have no idea per se, you know, if there's anything as far as more standard than that coming out of the courts or anything else. Consistency with the compatibility with general land use, you know, things like that. You know, I think these are all questions that revert back to what's in the master plan, because that's what that plan reverted back to. You know, we know that we have public services there. We know that this is there is a infrastructure issue in that intersection, no doubt about it. I don't think we could ever build a lot of homes there until we figured that out, or someone figured that out. But again, what can we do there? You know, you have to balance
I don't know when
that.
I should interrupt you, and especially not watching.
Yeah.
So I apologize
Just-
being on
no.
the phone line again.
Real quick.
So no, just the compatibility and stuff. I thought, you know, through the meeting, yes, you're right. Standing in that field, go 2,000 feet to the south. You know, we certainly have industry, and Mr. Bloom has offered me some of his property on Old 12. Old 12 seems to be a little more industrial. You know, you got that right on the corner, the dynamometer shop, steel heating, cooling, but it's 2,000 feet away, and probably about the same distance as some of these homes. So it's right on the fringe, and I understand everyone. I thought at some point, I certainly have heard, why doesn't he go somewhere else with this? And this was from 10 or 15 years ago. I did only own a property where the Chevy dealer parks their cars at. And at that point, the board didn't want me there neither. I was happy to stay down here As I said in the last time we spoke, it wasn't until the state police, Washington County Sheriff, took the contract from the tower that had it for poor service and complaints and asked us to cover the area. Because of that, I'm coming. A little background. I have tried to go elsewhere.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate you answering those questions too. I'm gonna turn it over to other members of the planning commission. Tom, Sandy, anybody have any comments, questions, concerns? Because we got to figure this one out.
Sure, Dave.
Yep.
I'm having a hard time. I'm sitting there looking. Can I see any industrial? If we had that other lot towards the south there, had stuff in it, maybe I could go along with the idea, but that's like out in the middle of frickin' nowhere. And I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that toll place should be out there, if not someplace else.
So you're talking about the major issue, which is
Yes.
the zoning and the parcels around it. Yeah.
Exactly. Does it fit there? I'm having a hard time seeing if it fits there.
Right.
And that's my biggest problem with this. Does it fit there? It was down on the other parcel on the other side of the creek. I could probably wrap my head around it a lot better, but where it's at now, I'm having a hard time buying into it.
And I don't know if I should be commenting here, but I'll go back to that. If 1,000 or 1,500 feet doesn't make that much difference. I do understand where you're coming from. I am sympathetic to both sides, but
I guess what I'm trying to get at, if we already had development down there, I could say, sure, we could do that, but there's nothing down there. Plus Spruce Run, that creek has brush and stuff along there, and elevation is different too, I do believe. You might not see it as bad as where it is right now, but I'm just saying it's way up the road more so than, I guess my picture when I sat here, that it would work its way towards the railroad track instead of the railroad track back towards 94.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman? Because I think
Alan, real quickly, I'm going to go to Sandy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I think the problem is that this land use is so low intensity, believe it or not, relative to the size of the property. The other property that you guys are talking about isn't available for sale, and I have a feeling that with the proximity to the interchange there, that someone might have future visions of something more significant than a little tow yard, in the middle of that, unfortunately. But I think what we tried to do, and maybe a focus could be on the frontage. This was a small use. We situated in the back of the property as opposed to putting it like up by the road. So it would be sort of wouldn't be the driving force of future development along a Pierce Road. And then we created these two parcels that would be along the road that hopefully we don't have any problem, because we're going to own that property. I should say, not me. I don't know, but Mr. Kern's going to own that property. And he doesn't see that it would be an impediment to try to bring some other uses to that property that would be, what we call a mixed use. So you've got all this acreage, and mixed use means you're going to have maybe different things in there. You might have some commercial, you might have some industrial, you might have a research office facility. Who knows? It starts somewhere. This is sort of that use that's a small use within it that we're trying to screen and locate in the most appropriate place that we can have it, and then create an opportunity along the main road to do something that would be more, would be a different use in that regard, or part of that use, because it's hard for us, as you guys know this better than I have. The property all this property's been on the market for a long time. And it's not like we can come in with you and say, we're going to build an office building there, and we're going to put in a restaurant on that piece. That's all going to take time. So that's what I've tried to say about all that, the mixed use.
No, I get it. And actually, I think the think that's helpful. I mean, those two parcels out front are tough. They're small. Because we're doing a conditional on this whole lot, even though you're splitting it at the same time. It's like, yeah, they're industrial, so we put conditions on what industrial, but quite frankly, I can't see anything industrial going there. I think it's more of a
I agree.
Yeah, I think it's more of a,
That was the intent. That was the intent of doing that, because we didn't have the ability to do split zoning, apparently. You know, so that's why we even put in our agreement that it could be used, you know, we could come back and use it for other uses that are allowed in the master plan, whether it be general commercial or multifamily. Who knows what the future lies, but that's the frontage. That's what you want. That's what you're going to see and be the entry off the expressway into the community there.
Right, exactly.
So that's,
and they're much closer to the wetland delineation lines too. So.
Right.
Okay. Sandy, I was going to call on you, and then
Yes.
There you are.
I can certainly understand the appeal of being on Pierce Road, because it's right next to entryways onto 94 going east and west. And there's not a lot of that available around. Although it was interesting to hear about a different piece of property. But, you know, I've heard people speak about concerns of environmental concerns. I'm not a scientist. And so my concern is that of a lay person. And I look toward others who have more information to inform me. But I think one of the things that that I think about is, you know, the compatibility of the land pattern in the area. So there's houses, there's residential, and then there's this large piece of land that has nothing on it. So, you know, it's hard to think about it because of the zoning being mixed use. This is the first of anything that's not residential going into that area. But it's still hard for me to see it. Seeing that mixed use around so many houses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely understand it. Yeah, I'm right there with you. And other planning commission members, I don't need to call on you if you want to speak up. But you know, I think there are two ways to do this. We certainly could say that this isn't the right place to do this conditional rezone, and that's our recommendation board, or we could say it is, and then as Mr. Green had indicated, be very, very specific in the agreement. You know, even going so far, we could ask Thal, you know, is there ways we could you know, put tighter restrictions even on the agreement that we have in terms of what we want to see in those other two parcels, in terms of, you know, what it would look like for buffers, and certainly there's more things that could be done. But if we're not to that point, because we certainly have to get over the fact, is this the right rezoning for this specific use? So definitely hearing the concerns about the surrounding area and about the issue of outdoor storage. So other planning commission member, just go ahead.
I'm sorry again. I can't see it, so it's hard for me to. It's Bill Kearns again. I guess you know that probably. You know, unfortunately, we only do hear people that do oppose it. Chris Minnick and Mark Warner and Mr. Kalmbach are certainly more immediate than anyone, and they all support it. I think Chris gave a letter last time or came in. So, and I think you're probably used to that, but I just thought I'd throw that up that Sylvan does have 3,017 residents, I believe, who have 40 on the line tonight, and probably 30 of them, possibly 20, I don't know, but that oppose it. So we only hear from the ones that oppose it. We don't hear from, you know, all the dealerships in town that would like me there, the police chief that would like us closer. I'll hear from them.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I'll try to keep quiet.
Yeah, thanks. No, I appreciate it.
I'm passionate too.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. But yeah, I certainly get it, and you're absolutely right. We hear I guess that's the job. I always wondered why township boards were able to create these planning commissions, and I think it's basically so that we can take all the heat and we just burn in the fire, and then we give Sandy a break, and then she doesn't have to do it. No, I'm sure there'll be another discussion at the board level about this, but as a volunteer trying to do a job, I guess that's where I lie. So any other comments, questions from planning commission members? Otherwise, we have to do a motion either way, and I'm open to any suggestions.
So Dave?
Yes.
Am I unmuted? I think I'm unmuted.
Yep, you are.
One of the things then we do for this particular piece, and this probably will lead into your motion for this piece of it, is to look at the master plan and determine the various pieces of that and how this particular request fits into it. And some of them that come to mind are the compliance with the master plan. We've talked a lot about that. We know that it's very, very important. We know that this is an industrial rezoning. The master plan says that we will have light industries. And then there's the question about whether this is light or heavy and so on. The other thing to look at is the consistency with the zoning in the general area. We've talked a lot about that. The difference between ag, basically rural in an ag district, and that's a significant piece of it too. The consistency and compatibility with the land use patterns in the area. There are multiple residential properties here that we do have to give consideration to, and we've talked about the various other mixed uses that would be appropriate. The question then is this one. Traffic, we talked a lot about that. One of the things to consider is this compatible with our master plan, given that there will be some heavy trucks going up and down, and the potential impact that has to Pierce Road, which is a major roadway from the south to the north through a lot of different areas of Sylvan Township. I would say beyond, but I don't think Pierce Road really goes beyond Sylvan Township. But that's a major consideration in having this kind of business on Pierce Road, at least that portion of Pierce Road. Identifiable public need. Is there an identifiable public need for this particular type of business in this particular area? And are there other towing companies nearby? I'm thinking of one that's located in Lima Township. One of the residents did mention, and this is also something to consider in our master plan, is the diminution in value of the lands or properties around such a business. Would there be an impact to that? And it has been suggested that it would indeed have very much an impact on that more residential area, especially to the north above or to the north of the railroad tracks and to the west of Pierce Road. And then, of course, always to consider citizen opposition, though citizens do and should share with us their thoughts. That doesn't mean that they are always right or we are always wrong. But in this particular case, we did have a high response to this public hearing. And it's been fairly well documented in the letters and in the emails that we have received. Mr. Kern brings up a very good point. There were also people who were in favor of it. Unfortunately, we didn't get as much of that response. But these are all the things that we need to think about when we make the motion and are called upon to vote for approval.
Yeah.
Or we're not approving or disapproving this. We are just voting to send it on to the township with a recommendation. So
Yes.
that's what I have to offer.
Well done,
Thank
Dawn.
you.
And I'll go through each one of those on my side of it. I think we'll agree on some, we disagree on others, but in the end, the most important ones, I think we might agree on. I don't know. But traffic, I look at all the uses that could happen in this area, and I think they're much, much higher traffic. I do understand that these are tow trucks, but I think a warehouse would be much worse. I think as far as truck traffic, I think even a commercial use where you've got an office building and you got 50 to 80 cars coming in and out every day. I think there's a lot in any residential. I mean, you could take all that ag land, spread it up into 2-acre lots, and you're going to have a heck of a lot of houses and cars. But I think that being said, I don't look this as a heavy industrial use. I think this is a light industrial use. I do agree with the applicant that this is a very minimal industrial use in that area. I think there are ways to make it that way. It just comes down to me to two things. The one that Tom mentioned, which is the conformance of how it relates to the zoning and area around it. It's a 2,000 yard question, right? Like one side of it it fits and another side of it doesn't. I drove up and down there a lot because I wanted to know, would it impact, and I don't know property values. I don't pretend to know that. And certainly I think anything we put there, an argument can be made that it'll change from, staring at a farm field. I think that's much more valuable today, but I can't tell someone that owns a farm field, you got to keep it a farm field forever. That's just not our job legally. But does it conform to the master plan? And I go down to that sentence that says, any use which requires the need for outdoor storage is not compatible with the MU designation. And I don't think you could run this business without it unless you built a really, really big pole barn. And I guess if you did that, it wouldn't be outdoor, and then you could take that off my plate. But that's what I come down on. So. Any other planning commission members have comments, questions? Otherwise, someone's got to make a motion, and one way or the other.
Curious, what's the longest length of time a vehicle would be in that tow yard? I mean, if they get abandoned, how long does it take him to get rid of them?
There is a standard in the agreement that we could certainly change and make it shorter, but I think it's based on his first proposal. And I want to say it was 30 days. I might be wrong. Mr. Green, is it 30, 40? Oh, you're on mute.
I think it's 75 days.
75, that's right.
And good to say this about the conditional agreement or conditional rezoning. The terms have to be offered up by the applicant. We can't add in additional conditions. Now, depending on whatever the planning commission decides, I mean, they can always come forward when they go to the township board with different, more refined conditions in their agreement that the board could agree to also. So, I mean, it doesn't mean they can't bring something more forward that is more restrictive for further consideration, but the planning commission and the township board can't dictate what those conditions are on the rezoning. I just wanted to make that clear.
No, that's very helpful. I've never done a conditional rezone, so anything we got wrong here, you pointed out to us. I'm sorry, Mr. Green, I interrupted you.
I think Rob is right in that regard. And I think as a matter of fact, because I talked about this, that the vast majority of vehicles are there for days. It's usually pretty quick, less than a week. We were just a little careful and concerned about what happens if there's some vehicle was there and all of a sudden people are complaining that red car's been there that long. But, and Rob's correct also that technically, it's not something where you could place conditions, but in my experience with all of these, we listen to what the community has to say and what the planning commission has to say, and we would have an opportunity if we chose. I mean, I can't speak for my client who I haven't talked to tailor things or revise conditions. After the planning commission meeting. So he's correct about that. So we try to be careful in that regard, but it is sort of negotiated in real life.
Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yes, that's what I wanted to hear.
Okay. So there's two ways to do this. You can make a motion to recommend approval of this conditional site plan, or to recommend to the board that we don't approve. But either way, we gotta take a vote on one of those two. So which one do you want to do first? Got such brave souls on my planning commission.
I can't make one, can I?
No.
Okay, sorry, a little humor.
Yeah, no, I'm good on that. Leah, I haven't heard from Leah. Let's
Can you hear me?
I hear you now. Any
Okay.
final thoughts?
Just, I kind of agree with Dawn with her thinking, and I drove out there today, and I've been out there several times looking around, and I just don't feel it's compatible to that area, and I still do have a concern about the contamination, even though it's supposed to be watched, and so those are my concerns. I mean, I know he would like to have a business, but there again, there is property out in Lima Township there off of Fletcher Road. That would be perfect. It's near exit, good exit there. So my thoughts. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Leah. That actually is helpful. I'm glad I heard from you. I know what motion we're gonna make. I just got to figure out from Attorney Thal the best way I'm supposed to do this. So is the motion I want to make, Mr. Thal, is to take a vote on a motion to not recommend the approval of a conditional rezoning request for this property from ag to industrial zoning, and take a vote on that motion. Am I good to do that? Is that
Yes.
a proper motion?
Yep, if that's what your motion, if that's the motion you want to make, you're fine with that.
I'm feeling that I'm being left to make this motion. So I'm going to make the motion, and I'm going to ask for a second. If there's no second for that motion, we'll try it in the other direction.
I'll second that.
So Tom seconded it. So the motion is the motion is to recommend to the township board that they not approve the conditional rezoning request from ag to industrial zoning. And I would add that this is based on a consensus that this is not compatible with the master plan because of two issues. One, the need for outdoor storage in this particular use. And two, I want to phrase this right. Hang on one second. The compatible with the general land use patterns in the area. So with those two reasons, that is the motion. Dawn, if you've captured that. I get a hey or yay, nay? Dawn?
Dawn, you're on mute.
If your dog barks once, it's yes. If it's no.
Gosh, and I was saying such brilliant things too. Actually, what I was saying is, can you just repeat that for me, please?
Oh, sure. Okay. The motion, and I can help you with the actual language here. So the motion is to recommend that the township board not approve the conditional rezoning of this tax ID number from ag to industrial zoning based on the planning commission's findings that it is not compatible with the master plan for two reasons. One, the need for outdoor storage, which is prohibited in the master plan for this mixed use designation. And two, that it is not consistent and compatible with the land use patterns in the area. Now, area could be questioned, and but for this motion, that's the way I'll write it. If I was to write it by myself, I would say immediate area, but then what's immediate? So that's the motion. Any discussion on the motion from planning commission members? A vociferous bunch you are tonight.
I think you're right on the outdoor storage issue.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm double speaking if I say it's the master plan and then I read that sentence in the master plan and we clearly thought about it. I wish there was a way we could store these old cars in a bubble hidden somewhere, but I don't think this use overall is is crazy industrial, but I think it does require an outdoor storage. It's certainly part of the business.
Dave, you might have lost Dawn there.
Did I lose Dawn again?
I-
No,
I
she's
hope,
there.
I hope I'm back.
Okay.
I apologize. My system is just being very difficult this evening, and I'm sorry for that. So Dave, it sounds like you've put together the motion. I didn't hear any of that. Mr. Thal, is it appropriate for Dave and I to refine that later, or must I record that at this time?
Well,
Because I
another-
didn't get any of it.
Is there another planning commission member that can write that down for me?
Yeah, I think that you probably have it down, so Dave can communicate that so that you can get it into the minutes appropriately, but number one, this is being recorded, I believe, and
Yep.
number two, I think the
Yes.
commissioners all know what the motion is, and he can assist you in getting that proper motion into the minutes.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other questions, comments on the motion, going once, going twice, we will do a record roll call vote. Mr. Barris,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
the chair votes yes. Sandy,
Yes.
the motion is adopted. I want to thank the applicant. I do have a follow-up question for Mr. Thal. As far as the agenda, do we need to do a preliminary site plan motion or just hold off because it's up to the township board? If they override us and say yes, then it comes back to us anyway, right?
Right, so I would make a motion for the time being to postpone the matter until such time as the board's acted and appropriate action would then be taken.
All right. I will make that motion too. So I'll make a motion to postpone the preliminary site plan approval and special use permit approval until such time as the board has taken action. And do I have a second for that?
I'll second.
So second by Steve. Did you catch that, Dawn? Just nod your head.
Yes, I did. Yes,
All right.
thank you.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. I doubt we have any other comment. I'll pause for a second. No other debate on the motion. We will record roll call vote. Mr. Barris,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Leah.
Yes.
I love it. Chair votes yes. Sandy.
Yes.
Unanimous members present voting yes, the motion is adopted. I want to thank the applicant. I know it's not the outcome that you wanted, but you've worked hard on all this and you have another township board meeting to prepare for. So
Well,
I say,
we appreciate your time. We really do.
yes. And
Thoughtfulness.
and thank you, Mr. Kern. And I'm sorry the technology was a problem, but I'm hoping all is well.
Yep. Okay. Thank you all for doing what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, moving right along because we're getting late in the evening and pretty soon Luke's gonna bust down this door and I don't know if he'll have clothes on or not. So, it's bath time. So just warning you guys. Preliminary, we did that. Communication. We did have a letter that was officially addressed to myself that we need to address, but I think Carol and I have figured it out. So the letter is from the applicant for the, I'm going to name the project right. Carol, help me out.
Chelsea Square.
Chelsea Square.
Can you
Thank
hear me,
so much.
Chelsea?
Yep, Chelsea Square. And the letter stated that they would like me to do a special meeting if I can't get them on in September. Well, lo and behold, we had another project want to move to October. So we've informed them that they will be in September. So unless planning commission members tell me that 3/4 of you won't be here in September, then I don't need to do a special meeting for them. I assume most everyone will be here. Yes, no? Yes, Sandy's yes, Steve's yes.
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 Yes, all right, that's enough. That's a quorum. So we don't have to act on that, but we do have to tell you all that we will be taking up Chelsea Square for final site plan. And what am I missing, Carol? What else are they doing on that one?
For Chelsea Square, that'll, are you talking for the agenda? For Chelsea Square, it's the final site plan. The other item on the agenda is Chelsea Hillcrest is coming back for an amendment to their site plan for the 17 units. They want to remove sidewalks on one side of the street.
Yes, those are the two issues. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and we had discussed that at length in their site plan review, and they're coming back to us to tell us why they just can't handle that. So it'll be interesting. Those are the two issues in September. And then October, we had an applicant. I think Patrick's got something he wants to bring to us, and potentially something else, Carol, that's slipping my mind.
Well, we had talked about actually getting the zoning map done, because everything has just kind of gotten ahead of the zoning map. But we had talked about that back in March, and then all these projects kind of came in front of us. So, you know, maybe October would be an opportunity to really address the zoning map, since we would, at this point in time, we will only have one other project.
Okay. Yeah, as long as it stays that way, which it seems that it will, because we're going to start in on the countdown for days for submission, then I would, I'd agree. We could at least start the process of looking at that zoning map.
Yep, and unfortunately, everything that we're doing right now requires our attorney, Mr. Falls, intense review for everything that we're addressing. So.
Understood. We try to be judicious with his time, but certainly find ourselves in a web of need at the moment.
We do recognize he does have other clients that we seem to take a lot of his time.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate his time. Thank you.
We sure do.
Okay, those are the communications I have. Anything else from other planning commission members?
Dave?
Yes.
I know that our agendas are always very full, and they will be in September and October, and who knows what November and December will bring. But this evening's meeting definitely highlights the fact that we have to start thinking about our master plan and its revision. And I believe that's due in 2022. Yeah, that would be the 5-year review. So just to put it out there as a possible future action, we need to start thinking about carving out time to think about how we're going to proceed with that. Thankfully, most of us on the commission now went through it in 2017, so we have much more experience now than we did when we did that one. But still, I'll just put it out for us to think about.
This is Carol, and I just want to throw out that we can definitely ask the board to include that in their budgeting for the following year.
That was going to be my point. Yeah, could we ask the board to think about 2022 is going to be the start of that process? It certainly is a long process. It takes well into a year by the time you do all the hearings and all the letters and all that stuff. I do remember it's a long process. I have no doubt that we will see much better public participation than we begged for last time. You know, I remember sitting there in the township hall thinking, how do we get more people here? And I think Rod said, let's put something in their tax bill. And we tried that, and even that didn't get them there. But no, I think it'll be a good time to review. So just let me know when you're all going to start that, and I will retire the day before. So thank you. All right, let's get out of here. Hearing nothing else.
If I may, just one last thing. A huge thanks to Carol and to Kathy and Amanda for the work that they've done preparing for this and all of the meetings. A special thanks to Sue Dickinson for the work that she does, and Mr. Thal. You just make this so much easier for us, and we do appreciate that. So thank you very much for your input into these meetings and guiding us along. Thank you.
You're here. Agree. Thank you.
Yep, second that.
We will, okay, let's move to adjourn. Any opposition? No?
Nope.
All right, I will make a motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Barris, I heard.
Yes, sir.
So Tom,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Steve,
Yep.
Leah,
Yes.
chair votes yes, and Sandy.
Yes.
And the motion is approved. Thank you all. We'll see you soon.
Night all.